Hi everyone, thank you for coming today to this panel in the market. I am Hannah Strong, the digital editor of Little White Lies magazine. I'm very excited to be here presenting this panel with the European Film Academy about empowering audience voices. We'll be discussing audience reception, curation, and insights with some of the most knowledgeable people in the industry. But first, I'd like to welcome Ms. Diana Rieber, who is going to give the opening statement.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the kind invitation. It is a pleasure to be here, especially to open this conference of the audience voice, which, let me say in this way, has a lot in common with the soul of our work in the European Parliament. The European Parliament is the only EU institution whose the members are directly elected by voters in all member states to represent people interested with regards of the EU lawmaking. In this way, it is given power to the citizens to take part in making decisions at the European level. Of course, our engagement with citizens does not end with the elections. We try to be very present in our constituencies, and the institutions make efforts to provide a variety of opportunities to stay connected with the heart of the citizens' voice. There are forums such as the recent Conference of the Future of Europe, events at the member states, opportunities to visit the institutions and engage in initiatives such the European Youth Events, the European Citizens Prize, and others. All of them aim to empowering the citizens to take active part of the building of Europe. One of these initiatives is also the LUX Audience Award. It is organized by the European Parliament and the European Film Academy in partnership with the European Commission and the European Cinemas, and it demonstrates the European Parliament's commitment to culture. The 5 films nominated for the LUX Audience Award covers subjects that touch upon the core of the European public debate, reflects our cultural and linguistic diversity, and link back to Parliament's legislative work and these issues. The LUX Audience Award is the biggest film prize in Europe awarded by the citizens voting. Both citizens and the MEPs are invited to rate the films and decide together the winning, with each group being wider 5%. This award is the successor of the LUX Film Prize, that the Parliament funded in 2007, and the People's Choice Award that was previously given by the European Film Academy. By launching the new award in 2021, both institutions and their partners recognize the importance of the active participation of the audience in promoting the European cinema. We also have taken notes of the lessons learned after the competitions in 2 editions of the LUX Audience Award in the COVID-19. Restrictions and change were implemented to ensure a wider participation and to simplify the rating process. For example, we're shifting from the call to action vote to rate, developing a simplified rating process through new rating platforms, and creating synergies with existing networks. Thanks to this reinforced communication campaign, in this moment more than 31,000 ratings have been registered already in this moment, tripling the total count of ratings for the previous edition. Around 5,000 screenings have been organized in the European Parliament across all 27 member states. Screenings are followed by debates, often also with presence of the MEPs, film directors, or actors. For the next editions, and due to the upcoming European elections, the 2024 editions will be officially launched during the Venice International Film Festival in September of 2023, with the announcement of the 5 nominated films selected by the independent selection panel, and conclude in award ceremony in March of 2024. The change is because we have the next elections in 2024. in June of 2024. And we hope to continue empowering audiences and contributions to accessible and democratic approach to culture. We thank the host of this event and European Film Academy for their excellent cooperation and promoting our joint award. I invite you to follow the award at luxward.eu and to show you love of European cinemas by rating the European films at the same website. We also look forward to welcoming you for the award ceremony in Brussels of 27th of June. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Diana. I now have the pleasure of introducing our panelists. We're joined by three experts in the field of audience curation and insights. So we have from Rotten Tomatoes, which is celebrating its 25th birthday this year, which is crazy to me to believe it's been around that long, Jacqueline Coley. We have from Torino Film Lab, which turns 15 this year. We've got a big year for birthdays. And the Nordic Factory Copenhagen, Valeria Richter, who is a screenwriter and AD and sustainability coach. And from social media network Letterboxd, we have George Fenwick, who is the London correspondent. I should have said Jacqueline is the awards editor, aren't you, at Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm just there.
Just around. I'd like to first start by just asking the panelists to say a quick word about their workplace, so you all have a kind of idea of how this ties into audiences. Jacqueline, if you'd like to start, I'm sure people probably know what Rotten Tomatoes is, but yeah, I'll let you say it in your own words.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's so interesting. We're celebrating 25 years. It was born in a dorm room in San Francisco, and now it's, you know, one of the largest film sites in North America. But really, Rotten Tomatoes is a platform for audiences and critics to find the temperature on what they think about a film at a certain time. We have our tomato meter rating, but more so than that, it's really a place for people to discover their next great film. I mean, the thing I love about it is talking to audiences and them talking about the fact that it's not that they're looking for 95% certified fresh. I find people every day that tell me, oh no, I want a movie to be in like the 60-80 range because that means it has a diverse opinion between it. Or there's some people, they're like, I don't even look at the tomato meter, I just want to know what the audience says. And as one of the few places that still has a verified audience score, where we partner with our theater partners like AMC and Regal, as well as with Fandango, our parent company, to make sure if you buy a ticket, you can then make a review that shows up as a verified audience review. It really helps to ensure that that is an accurate reflection of an audience and not maybe just an accurate reflection of some trolls online, which is a huge win for the site. And so I really am passionate about that. Obviously, critics are a huge part. They are the lifeblood of Rotten Tomatoes, but I would say that the audience is equally on the same footing, and if you go to the site, you'll see both of them there.
Thank you. I always find it fascinating. I mean, one of my favorite films is Lynn Ramsey's You Were Never Really Here, which I remember when that came out had a very divisive Rotten Tomatoes score, which I love. You love that.
You love that, and that's another one that was great, but it's still fresh. And it's, again, I love films like that where the opinion on it has changed over time. Like, you know, there's a ton of movies who have risen and dramatically fallen in estimation over the years.
So, Blair, if you'd like to introduce the Nordic Factory Copenhagen and the Torino Film Lab.
Yeah. Let me tell you about Torino Film Lab. It was launched in 2008 here in Cannes, and it's grown to be a global community of filmmakers. So Torino Film Lab is the place to look to for all sorts of training, script development, project development, TV series development, and also we have funding. So we have a co-production award, we have the audience design award, and we used to have the audience design labs, which I started with my colleague Lena Thiele back in 2011. So you can say within the art house fiction field, which was back then, we were sort of front runners in bringing audience awareness and audience thinking and considering to create a strategy for your film from, let's say, final draft onwards for your connection with the audience. Whereas I must say that in the documentary field, though, we were like latecomers, you know, like it's been much more prominent within documentary. that said, also because documentary deals with the real world, and there's often social issues, but sort of outreach producing and things that are related to working with audience design, of course, predated the work that we've been doing. And then Torino Film Lab decided that after 8 years, we should gather our insights and, working in the labs, we get to collaborate with the participants. And so we did a free downloadable book in 2018 that's on the website. And now we only have the fund, and we have one lab every year where we train. So we created a new profession as well. But it's very much a profession that someone who is a publicist also wants to add audience design to their toolbox, or junior producers or sales agents or others that sort of want to, even script writers, and they want to add this to their toolbox. So that's really been fun to create this new group of working people.
Because if you have the best film in the world, but you don't know how to get people to see it, then it's a tree falls in the wood and no one's around, doesn't make a sound.
Yeah, that's the question.
And George, would you like to introduce people to Letterboxd for those who may not be aware?
Sure. So yeah, if people don't know, Letterboxd is an app and a website, social media website for film lovers. So the whole thing is basically driven by its members. Members can like, share, review, compile lists, anything related to their film watching, and can follow each other. Everyone sort of has the opportunity to be their own critic, but also can use it in any which way they want. It can be a diary of your film watching, a compilation of films you want to see, a curation platform. And yeah, it was sort of similar to Rotten Tomatoes, it sounds like. It was sort of just started by two mates in New Zealand who wanted that and saw a gap in the market for it. Yeah, that's summary.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Goodreads of the film world. I use it myself, as I use Rotten Tomatoes. It's as a critic, it's like...
I'm a patron on Letterboxd. What are you talking about?
There we go. So I guess I'd really like to start with Rotten Tomatoes as the kind of oldest of the three resources in the room. And I'd love to know kind of about the evolution of the website. So where it started back in, 1998? Doing my maths in my head.
Yeah, so we celebrate it kind of a year after, since we're just basically in our 25th year. But yeah, so 97, which is a very seminal year in cinema, if you really sort of think about that year in cinema. And I think what's really interesting is it started as an exercise to determine how many of Jackie Chan's movies were rated favorably. This was literally like one of those late night dorm rooms. I think this is the highest rated Jackie Chan movie. No, you're wrong. So this was literally born out of a film argument. So they needed a metric to sort of determine that. And so they made this metric, and it is held through the test of time. That was sort of where Rotten Tomatoes began, or Rotten Tomatoes, sorry, you got me saying that now. Sorry, you got me saying that now.
Tomato.
I know, it's copying her. It sort of began from there, but was really morphed into more, especially with the audience reviews and with our acquisition by Fandango, which is the local ticket purveyor. It's the largest ticket purveyor in North America is Fandango. And then after that is like AMC in the studios. When they purchased us in 6 years ago, which is when I joined the company, they really became a huge part of the consumer tool. That's really what I like to think of Rotten Tomatoes as now, is it started as a film argument. And now, as we have so much, I would say, to choose from, both in the cinema landscape, and as so many films get lost in the shuffle, not being able to discover audiences, we are a tool that can help a mother of four decide which is going to be the film that she wants to bring the kids to go see, which is an ever-increasingly hard endeavor just to make that happen. We should not make the choice. That's why I particularly love our new What to Watch Hub, which is just launched recently, where that is exactly that. You can go, hey, you want to see some romance television shows? You want to go find the next new indie darling? Do you want to go find some blockbusters that might be coming out this summer? And that's where the site sort of, I think, lives now, but we will forever be about our critics and the ratings that they give. Here at Cannes, we got our scorecard. We got the top rated films going down to the bottoms, and I think that really sort of encompasses Rotten Tomatoes today.
I think as well, it's really interesting to watch how festivals have that kind of initial wave of scores, and then as the audiences start to trickle out and we get different people's eyes on it, those scores kind of change, both audience and critic scores.
Yes, there's often a shift or a bump, as we like to say, with some films as they reach different parts of the audience. But that's why I like to say it's a snapshot. Usually, though, within about 3 months of release, whatever that score is will probably be where that score remains for the majority of the time.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that what's been happening is that large portions of the filmmaking community, for a long time, let's say the old paradigm is, this sort of linear thing, and audiences is just that big mass at the end that, a distributor will handle, and we don't really need to think about it. And that's just not true anymore. And I mean, so in that part of, let's say, moving into the future, that we really need to look at now, audiences are part of that whole sort of shift. That we need to respect them, we need to get to know them, we need to connect with them, we need to ask ourselves, what does success mean for my film? Why do we all queue in the same line to the same festivals if success for my film would really be reaching out to audiences in all kinds of other contexts, and to sort of really open up that conversation among us and to find, collaboration or just help discover that these things are out there and how we can use them, especially also I feel in Europe that we need to get out of the festival bubble, as wonderful as it can be, but to really open that up.
Massively. I mean, I adore festivals and feel very privileged that it's such a big part of my job. But you do always, when I go home to my friends who watch films and maybe aren't kind of in the film industry, they're always kind of asking me like, yes, but is it a festival 5 stars or is it a real world 5 stars? And yeah, I think that's something that increasingly we're seeing filmmakers starting to realize at the very first step as well, that it's so important to consider the reception of the film, which can be difficult, I think, as an artist, because you want to go with your artistic impulses.
Yeah, but it's also sort of sad that you spend maybe 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 years of your life getting a project out. And you should have, we need to change how we think about success, like to have different sort of stepping stones of success along the way. And I think especially if you can say that you've had a great impact campaign or just a good campaign and you've reached people, maybe not all of that campaign translates into tickets or streaming whatever data, but you had an impact on someone and you could put that and say, oh, we succeeded with that and that's good. And to sort of, oh, we created a good working environment. Nobody went down with depression during the shoot. Nobody went home and got divorced because of, the shooting days were so long, or so that it's not just sort of the end bit that becomes part of the success. And I think engaging with the audience from an earlier stage, like I said, sort of final draft-ish, when you know what your project is, you just take out a little bit of time to consider, what are my goals with this project? Why are we doing it? Does my producer have different goals than me? What do we want to tell the world? Why are we doing this? And for whom? And I just think that's part of also the whole sustainability thing we're doing now, because it makes it possible for you to use your resources better, like to create promotion materials during pre-production, production, and post-production. And that's just saving money. Still today, like 15 years ago, at festivals, publicists are screaming for good stills, because we cut out the still photographers from the budgets. But we do need them, and we need to know which scenes, which things are important and why. And that's all part of the promotion.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, in terms of distribution, knowing kind of who you want to speak to with your movie, it can be so much easier when you know the kind of distributors that you might want to work with, or what can they give
Exactly,
you.
and you will have a better dialogue with them because you already had some thoughts about it.
Exactly. Well, I guess this is where Letterboxd comes into it as well, because so many filmmakers use Letterboxd, love Letterboxd. George, I was wondering if you could kind of talk to us about the ways in which Letterboxd is more than kind of a rating platform.
Yeah, sure. I guess, what I was saying before, it's seen as a reviewing platform for a lot of people, but a lot of people don't use it as a reviewing platform at all. It's a community. People are there to engage with other film lovers. I think that's what's quite powerful about it, is that I think it taps into the fact that a lot of us love films just because we're emotional nerds, and Letterboxd allows us a space to just really express that. And a lot of if you scroll through some of the top reviews on really big films, a lot of them are engaging with it critically and beautifully, but a lot of them are also just saying Amy Adams, step on me, that sort of thing. And I think that is where Letterboxd is really special. people can connect, and also, in terms of engaging with each other, there's quite careful rules around who can comment on each other's reviews and that sort of thing. So it's a lot about engaging with each other in really respectful and lovely ways. And yeah, additionally, I think there's sort of I'm from New Zealand, where it's from, and I think we have this sort of like scrappy, can-do attitude that I think really carries through on Letterboxd. It's like film is for everyone, and you can't grow up somewhere like New Zealand without thinking that. Like my diet was like exclusively massive Hollywood films. Like Jurassic Park was my first favorite film, but that sort of brand of filmmaking was so foreign to me. It was so far away from the smallness of New Zealand. So I think that really carries through. It's like film is literally for everyone, and everyone deserves to engage with it on that level.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a very small town, and I think if I'd had Letterboxd, I would have felt so much kind of less lonely as a teenager, because you really need that sense that you can share your love of film with other people. And certainly having friends that work at Letterboxd and kind of knowing the community, it's somewhere where I see a lot of people kind of connecting with each other, and there are couples that have met on Letterboxd. It's kind of lovely in that way as well. Jacqueline, how has it been for kind of Rotten Tomatoes, like seeing Letterboxd come up? Do you see a lot of similarities between the two and a lot of differences?
I mean, I think I've talked to Gemma a few times on a couple panels about this. We look at Letterboxd definitely as part of people that are investing in audience communication. And so we're like, yes, please, more. Because the one thing you will learn with any platform is it's going to reflect the audience of the website. And we definitely try as much as possible to be a place where everyone can find their community. But what we're seeing more as, film sort of like avenues and television viewing habits become more narrowed, you need places like Letterboxd to sort of niche within even the niches, so that you can continue to have more people in it. Because I would look at it this way, to sort of just say, and this is maybe a poor analogy, but you're going to need your, your Marks and Spencers, you're going to need your Tesco's, you're going to need different places where everybody's going to be able to find what they want. And I think the more players, the better. And I love Letterboxd being here, because for a long time, folks were leaving the review audience space. Netflix took it off their website. A lot of film folks were not wanting audience reviews. So the more the merrier, especially right now, because otherwise we're going to just delete them from the conversation, and they're going to become increasingly more hostile to the choices that people are making because they feel voiceless.
Yeah, I think this is what kind of concerns me about a lot of the talk around AI, is that I don't want a robot to tell me what films are good. I want my friends to tell me what's good, and even not my friends, even people that have completely diametric tastes from me. I think some of the kind of biggest discoveries have been the films that I saw someone, I kind of love their writing, saying, oh, I don't like this film at all. And I was like, okay, well, it's got you really fired up, so I'm going to go and read it. And then you watch the film, and you're like, oh, I really connected with this. So, I think that's something that really AI will never be able to replicate, is that word of mouth thing.
And I want to use an example of where it works perfectly. TikTok right now, and I'm a bit of a book reader as well, and they currently have tons of these folks that are reviewing books, and they're normal person reviewers, but the algorithm is finding people who like those types of reviewers. So there's ways to mesh this technology, but in the end, it's still going to be, I need to talk to you because I need to know that you thought this other movie was good that I thought was horrible. There's almost like I need to know what your opinion on Darty Darko is before you recommend a movie to me. I do. I need to know how you feel about it. I need to know that.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to other critics, when I talk to fans of films, if you ask someone kind of for their, for example, the new Scorsese film, I was talking to my Cannes flatmate last night about this, and she's kind of saying, oh, I wasn't really that keen on it. But I'm not really a Scorsese fan. And I was like, okay, well, now we're getting somewhere. Now I understand why that might be. Whereas, for me, as a massive Scorsese fan, I was kind of saying, I like it, but here are my kind of criticisms. I think this is, that's kind of a very valuable thing as someone who looks at audiences as we do and kind of tries to learn from them.
Yeah, I think there's sort of you know, a key trend word for the last couple of years has been relevance. You know, who's it relevant for? And then on one hand, you have sort of streamers might not care what you're watching on their channel. I mean, they push certain projects or films, series. But on the other hand, as long as you're on their platform, they can generally be happy, right? So I think that some of that, let's say, overall fear of, let's say, what we call content versus the art form of cinematographic, you know, audiovisual storytelling, sort of, maybe the audience is our, you know, ally, our rescue, our, you know, they are the ones where we can go and say that stories still matter. It's important, the type of stories we tell.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, I think I certainly am guilty of this, of saying at a film festival, like, you know, if I watch something and then it never seems to come out or never like gets kind of the reception I think it deserves, I always say, well, it hasn't just hasn't found its audience yet. And I think that's what our job is, kind of as curators. My job certainly as a magazine editor is helping connect those two dots, connecting the filmmakers to the audiences.
Yeah,
well.
I mean, also since, you know, it's the opening weekend, it's the first week, and then, you know, something gets killed or something gets axed, and when it came out that Everything Everywhere All at Once, you know, that they had kept that, okay, very limited number, but they had kept that in cinemas for over a year, I think. That's like, all right, you know. And the things that, you know, some people just don't go to the cinema. So if you have a limited marketing budget, why not, you know, and we're getting there now, that they can premiere on different platforms on the same time because they cater to different audiences. But you get better use of your marketing budget. I don't know, on TikTok, have you come across this where there's like communities like of young film buffs that are sort of teaching film history to other, and I felt the same, you know, I spoke to colleagues way back, you know, when BitTorrent and piracy, and, you know, and it was, oh, there's a huge problem of piracy. Yes, it's a problem. I'm a scriptwriter, you know, I want my royalties, and they, you know, they never come, they trickle that far down the chain. But anyway, but I think it's such a complex issue also with piracy, because a lot of it is also like that you can see these forums where there is access to old films in a way that you'd go to your local video store and you know, if you were lucky in your town, they would have the old films, but now you can find them online, and it's a love of film. And I think we need to look at the complexity of all these different things. And if we don't cater to audiences, they, just like water, they flow, they find their own way to get to what they want. And we just need to understand that instead of working against them.
Well, I know that Letterboxd has done a lot of work with this as well. There was a list fairly recently, I want to say, a kind of project between Letterboxd and the US distributor Vinegar Syndrome with kind of, how would I word this? Not making like porn films more accessible, but just kind of like looking at how to treat those as potential art objects and kind of reevaluating them. And I guess it's a similar thing with Rotten Tomatoes in that you're giving the audiences the tools to be able to go back in history and look at these films and say, oh, wait a second, this film, you know, that I've never heard of looks really interesting to me. Yeah,
I think that's where like lists on Letterboxd are really exciting, because there are some amazing lists out there. Like people are so smart, and like taking you through journeys of certain, you know, this, if you wanted to look at the history of cinema in Italy, you could find a list that showed you where to start, how to see its development, its growth, and like that is so exciting. Like, how fun! It's using the intelligence that exists among the audience.
So any depressed filmmaker that I meet, I will send to Letterboxd, and they will find their enthusiasm about creating films in this, you know, market or context we're in.
People fucking love movies. It's true.
I just wanted to add something that she was mentioning about piracy. I was actually speaking to an executive at Universal recently, and they were talking about the fact that in Africa and a lot of China as well, piracy has obviously been a huge issue for a lot of studios, and they looked at it with this very angry and adversarial point early in the adventures, and then they found out that eventually the problem was, this is the underdeveloped world. These people don't have an avenue to actually get this in a viable way, But if we invest in infrastructure in these nations, they eventually can. And so they're really looking at investing in places like Africa and Southeast Asia to get cinemas, to get more sort of movie purveyors out there, to, you know, get their version of Redbox to be more readily available. But there's a lot of issues to it. You know, they don't have credit cards as often, maybe in some locations comparatively to, say, cell phones. So you can make it to where it's cell phone activated. Anyway, these are all things that they're dealing with. But what they found is that 10 years of just insane piracy just put this incredible seed of cinema, an entire generation there, to where they are the most passionate movie fans that we could have ever asked for. And so there's a lot of hindsight into piracy. Again, everybody wants to get paid. We're not saying that we're going to encourage it, but there has to be a sort of a push-pull of, like, if you're seeing this, maybe that gives you a chance to, like, let's not go lock people up. Let's invest in getting them infrastructure so piracy is less popular.
Yeah, because I think that the most kind of like prevalent pirates I know are the people that love cinema the most, and they want access to things more than they just don't want to pay for things. It's that things are so difficult to get, and whether that's because they're not getting released on physical media or they just disappear from the internet because streamers decide they want to hide them, which we're seeing increasingly more, which must be so frustrating for filmmakers if you spend all this time making something and then physically people can't get to see it.
It goes for TV series as well.
Excuse me. I'd love to kind of know, from the kind of filmmaker perspective, Valeria, how tools like Letterboxd and Rotten Tomatoes can be kind of used for kind of more research purposes, more than just kind of a fun like thing for them to participate in as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to promote the hell out of them now that I'm getting to know them more, I must embarrassingly admit. No, but there are different forums out there, just like, you know, I know Goodread and so on, like for books, and but it's very much been more under like Google Analytics or, you know, these kind of things. But we have been very inspired when we did audience design, obviously by design thinking, and this idea that if you test things early and you sort of and you get the feedback, and then you change, and you loop back, and so it's that sort of a looping testing process, and to go out early. And I know that from a certain sales agent or publicist point of view, it sometimes feels counterproductive. Like they say, don't burn your best stills that early, you know, in the process, or because then you cannot get, you know, the reviews or the interviews that you need at the festivals. And so I think we need to speak again more together about how do we work on building audiences early on while not shooting ourselves in the foot with the, let's say, more sort of professional audience approach that is there. And again, so we just need to have the conversation earlier. And I think everything is moving that way. So if you look at, again, green shooting, sustainability, it needs to start from the script onwards. If you look at virtual production, everything is pushed much more into pre. So I think we really also need to boost the value of development and of the whole pre thing. And everyone is always like, oh, but we need more money and time. Yeah, that's the same old song. So let's instead see what can it give us. You know, how can we make these things assets in the beginning instead of burdens for the financing? Every financier is asking for all these things now, you know, diversity, inclusion, marketing, audiences, sustainability. We might as well put it up front and, you know, get better and figure out how do we, you know, it's going to be, it's this sort of linear thinking. I don't know how prevalent it is, but I think to a certain extent it's sort of in our spines, but we really need to think more cyclically. And also, if a project does not happen, you know, you look at the startup community. If you're an investor in startups, how many, if you invest in 10, how many do you expect to actually become a success? 1. So it's like, for us, it's like we're a failure if we don't manage to get films, you know, financed and going. But I don't know, maybe people do this, but we just don't talk so much about it, how something that didn't happen maybe made something else happen, or, you know, or that we created something great during the development that we can then use in another way, or, so this idea of, yeah, moving the investment around a little bit. I think, and I mean, a lot of films are being produced, but it's not necessarily the right voices or the right stories, you know, that get made, you know, so we need to broaden the spectrum in regard to inclusion and diversity. And that's, you know, part of the same coin as sustainability. And again, audiences are part of sustainability to stay relevant. You know, if we're going to be disrespectful of them, why should they support us? They'll go find stories elsewhere. So.
Well, I think we've
Or
noticed.
make them themselves anyway, you know.
We've noticed at the box office, I think, with something like Marvel movies, the kind of starting to downturn kind of proves that, well, suggests at least that audiences are kind of getting a bit fatigued maybe by this particular genre. And we see that across history, you know, things kind of fall in and out of favor. Jacqueline, with filmmakers, what's the kind of relationship like between filmmakers and Rotten Tomatoes? I'd love to kind of know, because I think for such a long time it was seen as a kind of
adversarial side.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's interesting that you mentioned that. We've been around for 25 years, but the first 15 or so was part of that early days of digital media. We're talking in the, you know, Screen Rant, Ain't It Cool News. This is very Bad Boys, I don't like your Hollywood, you know, sort of thing. Remember when there was the Sundance Kids? Well, the Sundance Kids then gave birth to sort of their children in the digital space, which was the early 90s and early 2000s digital media. Anyway, so that has changed. That sort of, it's there in the name, throwing Rotten Tomatoes. It's going to be a little tongue-in-cheek. But I will say, now that folks realize that we don't care what the score is. We actually wrote a book called Rotten Movies We Love. It was the first book that we produced. And I always like put that up to be like, if you think that we are somehow thinking that because your movie gets a bad score, that doesn't mean that we want to promote it, love it, and be a part of it. It's not that. I think once they sort of saw us less as that, it became a lot better. But I will add, everything they've mentioned about Rotten Tomatoes, they've said about Siskel and Ebert. They said about putting stars in the newspaper. They said about writing the reviews in the newspaper. They said it about inviting critics to screenings. These are all things that at one point we're going to destroy cinema. We're devaluing the art form. We're binary evaluations of art. Like, it's just, that is the consensus of criticism. And then depending on whatever tool you use for it, they will do the same. So one of our favorite things in the Rotten Tomatoes office is there's this like thing from like the 1860s where someone is railing against critics going to the theaters, and it literally reads like a Reddit forum post on somebody complaining about Rotten Tomatoes. And it gives us solace because that has always been the case. But there's also been the case that there are reviews from filmmakers and there's words that filmmakers have heard from critics that have completely changed their career, and we have to allow a space for both.
Yeah, I mean, as a critic, I think that everything I write is never coming from a place of malice. It's always coming from a place of loving cinema, and I'm sure that if someone goes to the effort of buying a ticket and making a Rotten Tomatoes account, they're not leaving reviews because, well, most of the time, because they you know, they hate movies. I think they're doing it because they love movies and they want movies to be better. And if you love something, you want the whole world to know. And if you hate something, you want them to know why you hate it. And
they definitely let me know. That is the one thing I will say is I will eventually write a book on the crazy things people have said to me in the lobbies of various theaters after I say, hi, I'm Jacqueline from Rotten Tomatoes. Like, whatever happens after that sentence is always amazing, because it's either, oh, I love Rotten Tomatoes, or it's like, you, and I'm like, no. But I also wanted to add to, on the other side of the Rotten Tomatoes part of it is there's also a huge part of independent filmmakers who know that certified fresh rating has made a huge impact on what they were able to do with their film. I love this story because she's a fellow friend now, and y'all go watch True Detective season 3, but Itza Lopez did Tigers Are Not Afraid. It was our #1 rated horror movie of the year. It won our Golden Tomatoes Award. She like met me later and she was like, girl, you don't know, like that was like early. We were a small release and people didn't know who we were, but that branding, they were able to put commercials out for that. And so, as I like to say, there's things on both sides of the ledger.
Could I ask George a question?
of course, yeah, why not? Yeah.
I'm just curious with Letterboxd, like sort of age and gender, because I feel like forever there's sort of an understanding that women are huge users of culture, and at the same time it's always more risky to make films with women, and I just don't get those two to match. So I'm just kind of curious how active, you know, female audience is on your...
You know, I don't know the exact data, but what's been interesting being here at such like an industry festival is that we, you know, for this Letterboxd social media, we've just sort of been accosting people in the street and shoving the microphone in their face and saying, like, do you know Letterboxd? Do you know Letterboxd? And consistently, the people who know Letterboxd are young women. And we actually spoke to an incredible young woman last night who was standing outside the Palais with a sign looking for a May December ticket. And we said, oh, do you know Letterboxd? And her eyes widened. She was like, I love Letterboxd. And she had traveled here on her own accord. She's not accredited. And she'd seen 13 films from standing outside the Palais. And we found a Letterboxd. She'd logged them all lovingly. And it was, that I think she is the you know, the prototype of a Letterboxd user, I would say. Yeah.
I'm just kind of thinking, because in financing, you're up against all these gatekeepers, right? And a lot of films, I mean, crowdfunding is hard. I know there are, like with a film chain, you know, the whole blockchain thing, they did also, they're doing crowdfunding, but it takes a lot of work for the producer and so on. But I think there's something there, and there's some other startups in development where they want to combine financing and marketing, which is really, I'm going to meet with them later today, and I think that's really interesting thing to think, like to make part of the financing to already start to look who can we engage with audiences, because you're always up against the data, like, you know, the market wants this, or this is what the audience wants. But at the same time, cinema is all about, you know, this old mantra of give the, you know, the audience what they didn't know they wanted. But at the same time, it's like very risk averse. And so I think we just need to open up to, you know, that there are niches can be super valuable, and you know, we still get in applications these, who's your film for? Well, everyone between 20 and 60, and that just doesn't exist anymore.
I guess, sorry, just to that point, that is where Letterboxd has access to so much data on audiences, and you know, there've been really interesting things about, like, what films are people rewatching, like Carol, for example, by Todd Haynes, you know, is one of the most consistently rewatched films on Letterboxd.
Fantastic.
And you know, that we're exploring ways to partner with you know, studios, producers, that sort of thing, to really tap into that data. There's such a wealth of information out there on what, yeah, viewing habits are, what is being rewatched, what genres that people are returning to, what excites people the most. So yeah, I mean, it's a wealth of information.
I think as well, something like, to think of a Cannes case study, something like After Sun, which obviously did so well in Critics Week here, and then really both Rotten Tomatoes and Letterboxd, I think, was so kind of instrumental in that film's success, because it was an independent movie, a small movie, and I know that the kind of beautiful writing that came out of critics' reviews and from Letterboxd users was so kind of front and center in the marketing campaign.
Can I just say one thing for that?
Go.
It topped our awards leaderboard for like 6 weeks getting up to the award season, because it like swept the British Independent Film Awards. And I was like, I understood what that movie was, but the number of people that were coming to our site just to look to make sure it was still on top, it was like, I don't know, it was like the weirdest thing in the world. Go ahead. That was it.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. There were reams and reams of 5-star reviews out of Cannes last year of After Sun, and I think you know, I'm a Cannes newbie. It's my first time here, and I think I once thought that would have been only critics, because a lot of critics do use Letterboxd. But being here, you know, experiences like the interaction we had last night with lots of other people we're speaking to, actually a lot of people are here as film fans first and foremost, and are, you know, maybe they're trying to become critics, and Letterboxd is their practice, and reviews like After Sun are where they are developing that art form, and yeah, we can use that. I think, you know, similar this year, How to Have Sex is I'm starting to notice having a similar effect. Lots of really, really enthusiastic reviews on Letterboxd out of that, and a lot of them aren't critics. They're just users who are passionate.
And I think that can be so helpful, not just from a filmmaker perspective, but from a distributor perspective, from a marketing perspective. If you go on Letterboxd and you look at who is actually responding to the film, and, you know, click on the profile and you say, oh, okay, well, this person that gave it a really good review is also a fan of X, Y, and Z. It makes it a lot easier when you're kind of looking at rolling out the film on a kind of wider scale. Who are the people that we should be kind of targeting, and how can we best reach them? Certainly, from a kind of critic perspective, you just mentioned about maybe Letterboxd is where people are kind of getting their like start as writers and film fans. We found it massively helpful in kind of finding people that are watching films and love films and want to write about them and talk about them. So it's not even just from a kind of filmmaking side, it's from a journalistic side as well. We have certainly found it really helpful in that way.
There's been a little bit, I've had a few producers as a scriptwriter that I've been talking to, and they were like, oh, but we're not interested in originals at the moment. All is like IP, existing IP, remakes. So this risk averseness is quite, and it's all like, because we're so used to, and I mean, dramaturgically as well, the models that, the 3-act model, and, it's white dudes out of Hollywood, it's like, why do we need to tell stories that way? But that's another panel. But, but just to say, we keep looking back in order to make things that it will be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And look at what the world is now and how unpredictable the last 5 years have been. And if there's a community that's used to dealing with unpredictability, it is creators, it's artists, it's, where we create something that doesn't exist yet, and we try to get others on the journey, and then knowing that there's a film culture and there's a hunger and a need and a connection to be made should sustain us in saying, let's also, become more, let's take the risks, let's try to let other voices and other people get heard and get into the mix, because there's a need for it out there. And the Danish Film Institute have been very active in focusing on audiences, and they've been collaborating with a company called Publikum, which is the word for audience in Danish, and where they have a lot of anthropologists and data people, IT people, and of course that's quite expensive, so you can apply the Danish Film Institute to have, during your script writing, testing within what you believe is your target group, which is a very wonderful and dynamic process, but it's only for the chosen few. And so the fact that there are all these other free ways of actually tapping into, figuring out, I really burn to tell this story. Are there any other people out there like me? And it goes all the back, to fan culture, which has always been looked down a little bit upon, but that's the mainstream, and we're doing the art. But it's the same thing. And even, and that's the realization through the work we've done in Torino Film Lab, is that even as an art house film, and even if you get into a sidebar, like whatever they're called here in Cannes, you're still fighting to get the attention of the journalists. It's still really hard, to reach the art house audience, because they are so broad as well, and they're spoiled for choice. So no matter where you are, you need to really consider, what should the journey be for me and my story?
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's not always about the kind of the obvious route, or the kind of like, instant 5-star reviews and instant kind of raves in all the trades. It can be, a film's success can look very different depending on what that film is.
But of course, as a filmmaker, you can say, I'm just happy with whatever audience I get. The most important for me is to get the festival accolades and get that success, and then I'm on to my next film. But okay, that's fair enough if that's what you want. But for a lot of people, they actually do have a sort of something they want to share with the wider world, and then it's really a shame if you spent 5 years and then nobody gets to see it. Like you said, that lonely tree in the wood that falls and nobody, it's sort of a sad image though, but it's just sad if you spend so much time doing something and then the people that would really enjoy seeing it can't find it. They're not discovering it. So how do you get into their stream or path of discovery? And the fact that we have, pages like, communities like, I would say, Rotten Tomatoes and Letterboxd, it's just there to tap into.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a DIY audience insights. You don't have to kind of be paying many thousands of dollars and euros to be doing focus groups. You can just kind of, to some extent, do it yourself and kind of try and glean the kind of people you want to reach and look at case studies of other films.
Absolutely.
I'd love to open the floor to any questions if people have them. I don't know if we have a mic. I think you can probably just shout. I think we'd be able to hear.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any online viewers that might not have heard the question. So yeah,
that's a good point. We now have a mic, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
They do have a mic. I'll just repeat what he said, since he was going for me, and then you can add yours, because I don't know how y'all do it yet. So I'm very curious. But basically, there's been this effort for he was asking the balance between verified audience reviews and if you got trolled. Like, for example, I hate to use this as the example, but Rotten Tomatoes initiated verified audience around the same timeline as Captain Marvel. Because that film was getting a lot, which I thought was the most hilarious thing, because the tagline of that was "Go woke, go broke," and the movie made $1 billion. But that is another thing for another day. That was when we launched verified audience, and so yes, it was in an effort to combat trolls. But this is the thing: if you want to make a review about a film at Rotten Tomatoes, you cannot do it before the film has come out. That is one, or until it's premiered at a film festival. If the review itself is not about the substantive quality of the film, if you just say, I dislike said actress because she does not hate the people that I hate, then you will not be allowed to make that review. And we have a very intense content review team that helps us with that. But anyone who has dealt in any instance of content moderation, you will know that that is the Titanic level of water coming in, and you have one bucket that you are trying to keep yourself out of it. So I would say we do as best a job we can to stay afloat, but we will never get above that tide. The best we can hope for is to continue to foster ourselves as a community that doesn't tolerate it. And eventually we found those people stop coming to us less because they know they're not going to get the same juice.
Yeah, I guess we take quite a similar approach with Letterboxd. I guess there's no sort of verification. There are different levels of memberships you can have, but every member agrees to very strict policies, which if you read them, they include, sort of the obvious and really important stuff about no hateful content and no abuse of other members and that sort of thing. But also, like, stuff that's really important to the film, like no spoilers, and you will have a spoiler thing put back on your review if you refuse to add it. So I think that sort of sets a standard, and there's also, a very active moderation that goes on. Similarly, it's a battle, I think, but there is a strict policing that makes sure that people are reviewing these films for the right reasons, and aren't just, doing what happened with Captain Marvel, which sounds awful. It's an uphill battle, but that's Letterboxd's approach.
Thank you, both of you. Has anyone else got a question? I mean, I can ask more if people... Okay, so going back to Letterboxd, obviously the community's grown so much in the kind of past few years that you've been around. Are there any kind of next steps that you guys are looking to take in terms of developing what you guys do, what you guys offer for audiences?
Yeah, I think really harnessing the audience. This is me promoting this panel. But it's true. I mean, as I was saying before, like, there is such incredible data available about film viewing, and we want to use that. We want to explore that. So I guess, like, with editorial, we're really expanding editorial, but that is all led by members. We include members in every sort of editorial piece we do, like the funny reviews or special reviews. Taking that back to talent and to directors and that sort of thing, but also partnering with cinemas, with distributors, putting on screenings, inviting members, sort of expanding that sense of community into the real world. Because I think people, as much as these social media apps can help us find communities that we love, we also do want to be able to say hello to people face to face. So yeah, that's gone down really well. We've done that in London a bit so far. And actually spoken to members afterwards, and just continuing to expand that sort of thing, and also tapping into the globalness of Letterboxd. I think a lot of people sort of think it's American, but it's actually New Zealand based, and we want to explore more festivals, edge into Europe a bit more. I think we want to look at places like Venice anyone who will have us really. But expanding beyond America and into the global film-loving community,
Have you collaborated with cinemas as well, or because I know, especially in the UK, there are certain cinemas that are really, really good at building their loyal audiences and. Yeah,
we have, and what's been really successful with that is we find that if we partner with a cinema on a screening, the member reviews afterwards will say thank you to X cinema for this screening. So it's a really powerful tool for the cinemas as well, because we want to take any opportunity to promo the independents as much as we can, and the chains, wherever you're seeing the film. So yeah, that's been really successful.
I mean, that's another thing that's massively kind of important in the film's life cycle, is that we need these spaces for people to be able to see the films. And obviously cinemas suffered so much kind of during the pandemic. And I think with kind of rising costs in every facet of life, but especially with, I know studios take such a big cut when it comes to actually showing films, and a lot of independent cinemas really struggle to turn a profit. So them being able to kind of get the promotion from places like Letterboxd and places like Rotten Tomatoes is so valuable for them as well.
My first job in the industry was as head of PR marketing in a theatrical distributor in Denmark, and it was always also this. I mean, these were for Scream. Obviously, we did a very particular big premiere and all kinds of activities. But you always had these amazing ideas about what you could do, like in the cinema for the premiere, or around the film, or sort of offline things. It was sort of the beginning of the online digital when I worked there, sort of early 2000s, late 90s. I'm afraid to say, but. It was always sort of landing on, budget, and there's no money to do all these fun things. And it just, that's why I stopped working with that. It was just too depressing that you could never do those things. But so again, I think if producers and filmmakers, they start figuring out what is the core thing, and how then they could also have a dialogue with, once they know who will be their distributor, and come with ideas, or maybe they already have materials, or maybe they can find a way to help, to finance, or you collaborate, because the cinemas are really open for that as well. Because they, of course, love film as well. Even in the big chains, you can find the people that organize the events, and a lot of them also do, obviously, pre-screenings, closed pre-screenings for companies that then buy the whole screening room, and, for their employees and so on. And you could do stuff there to even activate that, and again, you could put a clause until after the premiere. But there's just so many opportunities that we're not sort of exploring. Of course, it's because we're busy writing a script and trying to make a film. But again, if you sort of stop up at a certain point and just play around with this, it can also feed back into your screenwriting in a positive way. We talked earlier about biases and all these problems we have with shitstorms that then arise in the end because we didn't have someone very different from us read our script, or test our story with more diverse groups, and sort of prevent the shitstorms that might happen, but also enhance our story material and maybe make it reach wider audiences.
Well, we were talking just before the panel about the Scorsese again, and I think that one of the things I always love is when I go on Rotten Tomatoes or I go on Letterboxd and you see a kind of one dissenting opinion, whether that's like one person giving something a good review or one person giving something a bad review, because you immediately think, ooh, this is interesting, what have they said about this? And you can read it and sometimes find this like glaring kind of insight that you would have never had if you'd just been kind of like reading one review in a paper. It kind of offers this like snapshot of all these different opinions, which sometimes can be overwhelming, but oftentimes can be so useful as an audience member, as all of us are, as well as
the Wikipedia things, right? If you have these long-running, very complex shows that have different timelines and so many characters, and I need to go into the Wikipedia and see if someone smarter than me got how this is,
I think that was after Tenet that I did that, and it wasn't Wikipedia. I needed like 4 YouTube videos to figure that movie out. Not even a question.
It's called something else though, as well. There's sort of fan-driven wiki thing. It's had a different name.
Yeah, it's called like Fan Wiki or something. Yeah, but yeah, I was the same with Tenet very much. I was getting other reviews to explain it to me. Thank you so much for our panel. That's all we've got time for today, but you guys have been great. I feel like I've learned a lot. Hopefully all of you have as well. I'd like to thank the European Film Academy for putting this panel on. I'm just let you guys give yourselves a shout out on social media so people know where to find you.
Well, this is so embarrassing. I'm that Jacqueline on all social media. That is so American of me, too. I'm literally that Jacqueline on everything. Ugh, God. Thank you, Hannah.
Well, I'm basically just my name, or on Instagram, I don't even want to know what to say. I'm Feet Can.
No, that's a good reason. Yes.
No, well, I'm Feet Can because my left foot, my big toe has been amputated, and so Vanity Fair Italy ran a series on all the shitstorms that Cannes have been through in the last 5 or 10 years, and Heelgate was one of them, where women had to wear high heels on the red carpet, and obviously I can't do that, so I was stopped, and it became this big thing. And then all the big stars, Kristen Stewart and Julia Roberts, they went barefoot on the red carpet, and so I was just reminded of Heelgate this year, which is, I think, back in 2016. So that's why I'm feet Cannes.
Wow, there you go. I mean, you it's really embarrassing. That's an incredible backstory right there.
Yeah, I'm the empathy producer now.
I'm quite a closed book on social media, but I will say to follow me on Letterboxd. It's just my full name, George Fenwick, and that's Fenwick, because no one understands my accent when I say my own name.
I love your accent. There's nothing like a Kiwi accent.
Also, he's such a better person for not having social media. Like, I'm already just like, oh, you're living the dream.
Oh no, I have them.
You know what I mean, though.
I'm just
you don't
lurking.
have a public one. That's when you have one.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been really fun, really great. And yeah, have a lovely rest of your festival.